And one moment again, let me share it to my other page. All right. Hello. The point of this live video is going to be answering any and all questions about mysteries or riddles or anything else in the Bible. And I am simply going to help you all understand to the best of my ability. Now, I tell people in many of my not live videos that I simply am who I am. And if you don't like something you hear from me, just simply go your separate way. Or you can really say or do whatever you want. But what I was wanting to do is I just wanted to explain a few things at certain parts in this book, and I wanted to help people understand from a different perspective. Sometimes when people hear things from a different perspective, they understand it a lot easier. And so the first thing I wanted to talk about is the beginning algorithm in that book when the Lord God was creating the earth or the world or whatever. I see a lot of times when people deal with these types of books and scriptures, they don't necessarily use them for like spiritual. They don't use them for spiritual or metaphorical teachings. What a lot of times people will do is they take things literally, which can really affect somebody. And the reason I say that is because if instead you take something literally instead of understanding the lesson or story behind it, what ends up happening is you go falsely do things over here to the right instead of conceptually understanding something over here on the left side. Now, what I just said, left and right, doesn't have anything to do with the current political spectrum, though the current political spectrum makes me feel embarrassed. But essentially, the reason I bring up the beginning of the book is because what I try to get people to understand is that we are the trees of life. I am the tree of life. You are the tree of life. And the point of being told not to eat from a tree called good and evil is that, from my perspective, if we're going to learn things and we're going to understand things, I don't think in our journey or quest for understanding and knowledge, we are supposed to call things evil from a religious standpoint. And so if I was to tell a person as a doctor or something like that, like, you shouldn't eat this because it's bad for your diet and your physicality can't handle it or it's causing you problems. Well, then that would be good medical advice, which would then make the Lord more happy. That's basically right there. The Lord was baptized with medical advice. But if I, as an individual citizen, start going and telling everybody on the planet that pork is bad or that eating meat is bad, essentially not only am I lying and not telling the truth about the human physicality, I am misinterpreting scriptures and then creating vain sayings. Like, even in that same book, a lot of times it'll say, every man is a liar. Well, from my perspective, the reason why that is true and not true is because anybody can say anything that comes to their imagination. I could take a traffic light and say, if I think something in my mind, I can make the traffic light signal change at a different color. But that's not true at all. I'm essentially waiting for a timer to go off or until the street feels a certain weight and then the light switches. You see, now that bit of information could have just helped somebody who thought maybe they had magic powers in changing light signals, taking something literally. Or I could use a light signal as a metaphor and tell somebody, hey, you should really get back to yellow and then red, slow down. See, now I'm not talking about a literal light signal. I'm using it as a simple metaphor. And that's why I go back to the beginning a lot of times in that book, is because what a lot of people have done, which can cause somebody to be afraid or terrified or create something that's not for them, is they have created alternate entities, things like angels and demons and um, different other entities and gods. And what ends up happening is those entities and gods begin to manipulate the way a person thinks because they are then bound by certain fears. And that's a lot of times what antiquity was filled with. A lot of different cultures believed in something because they didn't have as much information and knowledge as we had. But the problem with believing in something is that when it becomes a mainstream societal norm, it's much deeper than religion now. Now, what happens is this is ingrained into people's culture or ideology, and then they believe things like sacrifice and murder and things that really cause harm are good. Or they'll believe that if they transgress certain laws, then they're being punished by a God. But my message to most people is that if you look at the Bible is like the word, which is like the rivers, the waters, right? And the person hovering over the waters is who I am. Because of the words in the rivers, there then is a world created by who I am. Because without me, the book or the words or metaphors or anything have no power at all. And so essentially that's the metaphor that I'm trying to connect people back to in the beginning, keeping us as the trees of life. Who I am creates my heart and my flesh, the heavens and the flesh, and then from there I grow. You hear a lot of times that children are innocent because they don't know when something is right or wrong. Well, the problem with that is as we grow, we begin to learn things from culture and civilization and our parents, and even the Ten Commandments talk about that, the sins from the parents. Well, sometimes sins from parents don't even have to come from your parents because we live in society. And so then when children go to public school, then the things that they've learned from their parents and aunties and uncles and different family members then leak off to your children. If there isn't a proper relationship or guidance, then they can be led to do anything no matter what you taught them. And so essentially, I'm trying to get people back to understanding who the Most High is, the one hovering above the waters, and why things like have no idols in the earth and in the ocean. Because what's the ocean? What's that a metaphor? For waters, rivers. And this entire book is like an ocean, and if you ingest it all, like ocean water, you could become sick, if that makes sense. You know, it's supposed to be like a stream that nourishes who I am and builds me up until I am mighty and powerful, but not for the wrong reasons. I do not become powerful to oppress and hurt others. I love who I am, but I love others as much as myself in a sense, to the point where you see a lot of people talk a lot of times about doing the right thing and helping others. Well, see, even there and still, what's the right thing? What's a good thing to do? And so, from my perspective as a man, I know what causes harm. I know about physical pain, but also at a higher level of intellect and awareness, I know about inner pain, psychological pain, spiritual pain. A lot of times people will ask me, what is a spirit? And the simplest answer I give them is react how the automatic nervous system or the consciousness reacts to external and or internal stimuli. Well, what's internal stimuli? Your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own pain, your own state of being and where I am at currently. Well, also external stimuli, something like this. If somebody sees me just randomly talking, they may think, what does this guy know? Well, if they see me solving this and see me talking, maybe it added +5 to my intellect. Maybe because they see me solving this, they will think there is more validity to what I say. And that very same ideology is why it says you have to be careful of the holy men you give power over you. Why it says call no man your father. Because another analogy I like you to understand, if you go into where God says his name, which is I am, and from our perspective in English, then that's essentially saying that we've been here since the beginning. We are. Outside of anything else that was created in our intellect, we have been and will be. Think of it like this. Maybe you learned a whole bunch of stuff and had a lifestyle. Then all that burned off like calories and fat when you began to exercise spiritually. I'm not saying pray for hours and do all these, but see, if that helps you, then do what you have to do to survive. I'm essentially telling you, no matter what God you worship or what you do or what name, You are the one giving power to everything. So if you are going to say Jesus is going to heal me and God's going to see me through, I am going to heal, and who I am is going to see me through. Because ultimately, when you take all the names off of anything that exists, what I just said is the most truest statement that can be. Even if you want to say, oh, it didn't work because I didn't give power to Jesus and God, who had to give Jesus and God the power? Excellent. Hello, Dan Saver. I think it's like this. Abel lives passionately, but Cain has the cheat codes, so to speak. He has my knowledge, but he's not able to manifest on that level. He's always missing. I like that because think about what was just said. Imagine, it reminds me of Inuyasha and his brother. I forget what his brother's name is. Imagine having ultimate power, but you're unhappy with that power. Imagine having something silly over here, but it makes you so happy that you just are in the clouds and in the heavens. Well, imagine the person that has all that power that's unhappy is a king. And every time he sees people more happy than them, he tries to destroy them. That's essentially the idea of Cain and Abel. From my perspective, Abel was happy, but it cost him his life. Cain was unhappy and he took a life. Neither one of those people won, but neither one of them lost because I don't know what happened to Abel in his heart. I don't know what happened to Cain eventually. There's people that get punished all the time, and until the end, they still look at the idea of the story of Moses and the Pharaoh in this book. Pharaoh saw all those works and seen all that stuff happen, but he still wasn't going, so to speak. Well, why is that? Why wasn't Pharaoh going? Well, because he was stubborn. He was unhappy. It's not the ideology of, think of it from this perspective. Now I'm a Pharaoh. I have everything I could ever want. But in my mind, I see these oppressed people and I think to myself, man, what if they rise up and destroy me one day? So I just projected twice. Thank you, Dan. I just projected twice. One, I am terrified on the inside of other people. Two, I am terrified that how I'm treating other people will come back and rend me. That's what's going on in the Pharaoh's mind from my perspective. And so what the Pharaoh should have done was, if the Pharaoh was afraid of how people thought or felt about him in that nature because he was oppressive, maybe the Pharaoh should have given them a super awesome life. I'm going to give you an example of something. Look at all these African leaders and presidents and how they're not really doing anything, right? And they're basically letting these European countries stomp all over them. But at the same time, from my perspective, I don't know what they're going through. They literally I heard they get arrested when they go back to European countries for like meetings and consulate stuff, which is good old EU. But anyways, the point is, there was a man that died, I believe either the year I was born or right before I was born. His name was Tom, and he was the leader of Burkina Faso. Now, people would be like, I don't want to get martyred like that, and I don't want to die. Woo. He didn't know that was going to happen. He was just living his life. Well, the point is, when he stood up and planted that seed, now another man who won't be touched, named Ibrahim Traore, is coming and doing the same thing, but greater things. And now the world is backing him up. I tell you guys all the time, the reason why I say perfect love casts out fear is because from my perspective, when we're gone, we're gone. I'm not saying we don't go on all types of magical roller coasters. I don't mean to offend anybody. But what I'm saying is, when it's over, it's over. People will be like, oh, you're going to this and that, and blah, blah, blah. But it's over. So then the same ideology, people will live for all those years and be slaves. That was the idea of Josephus. Josephus, according to written history, and imagine the greatest brother was named Joseph and all this. I can see, but that's for later on. What I'm saying is, the point is, that's like 50 Cent in that movie Get Rich or Die Trying. Like, when I find out who was writing these accords and these Josephus accounts, and then I see all these people named Joseph, the greatest, blah, 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 and Jacob, and all these J.A. names, it's like, dude, that's like if I wrote a documentary, and he was the first one that had. Anyway, the point is, Josephus got caught by a Roman army. When he got caught by the Roman army, for some reason, disclaimer, I'm just telling y'all what's written. I'm not teaching to do what this man was supposed to do, or what he made a suicide pact with his army brethren. When he made a suicide pact with his army brethren, they all basically in a cave. Well, he was like, "No, I'm not going." He got caught by the enemy and basically went to Titus and Vespasian. When he did that, he basically told them everything. Everything that could be known about everything. Told them all about Jerusalem's weak points. He told them how to get into Jerusalem. He told them all the stuff about Jerusalem. But then he told them about a man. When he told them about a man that was recently killed by another king, Vespasian and Titus lost it. So basically, the point is, Josephus had to go back and live in Rome. Now imagine he's basically a prisoner of war. Just because you're told to respect people, as we can see in America, that don't mean it happens. So now he is living in a foreign land all his life, and he is perpetuating with the enemy. That's basically what a lot of people are doing when they fear something. It's called Stockholm Syndrome. And I notice a lot of people are afraid of, like even with Jacob and Esau or Judas. People are like, I'm not Judas. I want to be like Judas. It's a character in a book. I understand you don't want to end up like Judas. You don't like, you're fearful for your life. But what I'm saying is you're taking a lesson of something. People look at Judas and they teach the condemnation all the time. But what a greater teacher would do is teach that Judas was weak because he allowed his condemnation to get to him because of his decisions. You should never get to a point where you regret life so bad that you do something like that. That's basically what it's teaching. So he made a mistake in life. He was running around with the man that taught forgiveness, 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 forgiveness. It's not the idea that he traded the man by telling on him. The idea is he traded the man by selling his life short and killing himself instead of fighting Satan. So I'm the greatest warrior to ever live. And as the greatest warrior to ever live, I have a protege. And then my protege makes a mistake and they run up on him and it's time for him to battle after. Lord, I know how to fight just like you. Lord, I know how to fight just like you. Then he just, that's what Judas did. He was around the greatest spiritual warrior of that book's timeline. And yet when he felt a tiny bit of condemnation, with the power he possessed because of those teachings, he should have been able to take that money, create an orphanage, and build the greatest church on the planet. But no, then Peter had to. But who is Peter? Who is Cephas? I call him Josephus, a Greek man. I don't mean, basically, I want people to ask me questions about the Bible or scriptures they've learned or things that they've learned in religion. And I like to give my perspective on those things. I'm not here to judge you and call you names, or I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's just one person that asks me any wild questions they've had about thoughts about this book or religion or anything you've been confused by, because I am here for you at the moment. I'm actually off this weekend. And I was about to go to bed, and my inner voice said, "What you doing?" And I was like, "I'm going to bed." And then it was like, "Oh, for real? Can you do something for me?" And I was like, "What's that?" And it was like, "You want to go live and help people comprehend Bible scriptures and verses?" And I was like, "Okay, sure, why not?" So yeah, man, that's how that's going. If anybody's got any questions about things, about anything in that book, I actually would like to go back to the beginning some more, talking about the beginning algorithm with not Cain and Abel, but with the initial serpent. See, from my perspective, I believe the curse is that we are the Most High hovering above the waters reading, and the serpent essentially, which is the word always was. You feel empowered when you read the beginning of the word. But if you remember correctly, the first beast that began to talk to people was the serpent, which means, from my perspective, wisdom. Wisdom began to entangle who I am. Wisdom began to, is this real? Is that real? I need to know this. That's awareness. You're learning, but we don't always learn what's right, if that makes sense. And so, essentially, once us as beings can get back to us being the Most High, what will happen is the rest will burn off. And when I say burn off, essentially what I mean is A lot of these stories are cool, like Noah's Ark, the whole crucifixion and all that. It's a great lesson and it's a great story. But until we treat it as such and stop making it so literal and actually follow some of these like ideas like don't kill, don't steal, don't want what everybody else has, don't have slaves. If you're caught with a slave, you're gonna be in trouble. Um, don't commit adultery if you're married. Like I said, if you're married, just simple, love who I am with all your heart and soul, and everybody else the same. If people would just start to follow that basic stuff, and then everything else could be like, I don't want to say cosplay. It could be like something, the imagination. I like Dragon Ball Z, but I know that I'm not going to create a literal spirit bomb. But what I can do is I can take my being, who I am, create a bunch of beautiful spiritual teachings for the heart, throw it into the air, take all the resources around me like Goku does, like the spirit bomb energy. So I'm using metaphors for everything around me, and then boom, explodes and everybody gets 1 second. Yeah. But yeah, essentially I'm trying to give life to the best of my ability. If it helps you, cool. If not, I'm sorry. I did not mean to not help you. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant to make you cry. But right now I would like to talk about King David and Solomon and some of these kings and the idea of even being pharaohs and stuff. So I was reading about David and kings and stuff, and the idea of him sending a man to war and then taking the man's wife. From my perspective, that sounds like maybe I conquered. Yeah, everybody, perfect. I thought in my mind, I began to think of an algorithm. Okay, maybe David took over a group of people when he conquered or something, and when he took over, and so obviously he would have to probably slay the leader, or he probably did. Troy. If you ever seen that movie Troy, where the two kings came out, and he's like, "Come out here now for killing my brother," and then they had to fight to the death. Maybe he took Goliath out for real, and they like left a stain on the earth and tried to force them people to come along. That's the same as an analogy as that. And so, just that simple metaphor I just gave you all about King David or Solomon, right? Let's say Solomon had became so wise, and wisdom is knowledge and information and learning, that he learned about all these different cultures and ideologies and all this different stuff. Well, when he did that, he essentially created new groups of people and teachings and ideas. When he created those things, especially if he was a king, when he created those things, then all those different teachings spread throughout the land, and then you have millions of new children. Look at Father Abraham; he's got millions and billions of children, right? We don't always just have physical children. Even if you look at the idea of stepdads and stepmoms and step hella parents and adoptions and stuff, it's there's all types of parents. Um, Half of growing is environmental, and basically essentially we get half from our parents, our genes and all that stuff, instincts and whatnot, but then the other half comes from our environmental care and what we learn and what we pick up on. And my problem with humanity is that I've noticed there's been a lot of picking up on violence and buffoonery, and so I'm just trying to help with that to the best of my ability, because I think we got it figured out in terms of technology and science and a lot of those things. But some of our cultural ways and the way we behave within civilization is like unrealistic, man. I'm seeing like people argue back and forth about certain stuff, abortions and stuff. Even putting yourself in the middle of an argument you know nothing about, like like if somebody's getting an abortion for medical reasons because they could die, and then you're just jumping in the middle of their decision and just being rude and throwing, or like PETA, they throw paint. That's why I tell people it doesn't matter how right you are. If you come off as an asshole, nobody's going to pay attention to you or notice. And so that's why sometimes I hate being a prophet of fire, because that's just what I call myself. I'm not saying you have to call me that too, but because sometimes it's like dodgeball. You got to get mean. You got to get angry. But that's really counterproductive. I don't. Sometimes I just get, a little besides myself and upset. And I have to remember that I live on a planet with everybody else, and we all come together like a family, humanity. Here we go. and we learn to love and grow and play. So back to the actual book, the four rivers. I really wanted to get this off my chest the other day. I see a lot of people going into Daniel talking about the prophecies and what the four rivers mean and a lot of other stuff. And I keep telling you guys, a lot of this book was written in like the 1500s. I'm telling you it was by William Tyndale. And people before them had Torahs. Like if we're going to talk about John the Baptist and Yehohanan and all that, there wasn't a New Testament. It was the Torah at the time. And it wasn't called the Torah. I'm just telling you all from the perspective that I know. It was the creation story, young earth creationalists. So, and the oldest Torah in written history that we have is from 1000 AD. That's written history. Yeah, thorn in my side. But essentially the four rivers, you would have a bunch of different men talking about anything that's said afterwards, after stuff is written and known and blah blah blah. Well, if you look at Daniel and you tie it back to the beginning, you would have four rivers coming out of the heart of the garden. So you would have the Tigris, the Euphrates, the blah 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 blah. So then those are symbolic for the four beasts from my perspective. And I'm going to explain why. The four rivers coming out of the garden essentially are talking about the four books that the Bible is even made up of. And when I say four books, you have to understand from a bigger perspective. First, you would have Moses and all that, the first five books, the Exodus and all that, right? That's Moses. Then you look at the next part, I call this Joshua and the Judges, because after Moses, his servant, was dead, then Joshua did some things. I'm not talking about the real men of history. This is like a book report. We're talking about the book. So then the third part of that book is Elijah, because he was the greatest prophet, and the prophets. I put Elijah up there. He's the one that had the fire and all that firestorm. So then you would have, after that, the prophet and apostle are basically like the same word switched around with different cultures. But then you have the apostles, and that was John the Baptist, or in written history, from my best perspective, you would have Zoroaster and Yehohanan, or Yahanes, or something like that. Yanes, I don't know. So essentially, those four rivers are almost symbolic of them. And a lot of the reason why this book is so prophetic and profound is because what I'm telling you guys is William Tyndale wrote this book, but he even says he had to give it to the German Vulgate or the German Lutheran something. And that's when Martin Luther, with his 95 Thesis, started going haywire. William Tyndale was dead. He was the one that gave us the book of John. I'm telling you, the way we have it in English. Then all this other stuff in books appeared. So, and if you research William Tyndale, you might like the guy. But anyways, the point is, you would have those four men in their rivers, their books. Eventually, those four men in their rivers were turned into very violent, very masochistic religions. If you just simply watch a documentary called 33 AD Church History to Present, you will see what happened when Yehohanan was crucified, who they call John in English, which is why Juan is the most amazing name. Another thing that I just recently learned, Morocco, Moors. So Spain is basically a part of Africa. It's like a little strait. So all those people up there that speak Latin and all that, they're Islamic and African. I didn't even realize that. And they're trying to talk about Spain as Europe. The Moors did basically reform and took over all that. I didn't know that. I didn't know Islam went up past the Byzantine and all that. I didn't know they went that far up. The more you learn every day. But essentially, those four men are symbolic of the four beasts that were created out of those rivers. Those four beasts combined create a mega beast, which is that book total, because of all the curses of murder and buffoonery and subjugation, the way it was written by German kings and English kings after that. Essentially, what you're looking at is, from the Torah, then came all this other stuff, whether it was Judaism and Jewish people, Persians and Islamists and Babylonians and all, whatever. They created a mega beast to where you have Hashem, God, Allah. Jesus is in there too, but it's basically a part of God. They can say they don't idolize in Islam any idols, but that's not true. They idolize Muhammad. Blessings be to the Prophet Muhammad. Muhammad, 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 Muhammad. That's idolizing. Then, even if Muhammad did a good thing, I didn't know this. Muhammad wasn't a warmonger. He didn't do wars and stuff. It's even a written history he didn't. You would be surprised at how many people like Muhammad. 60 years after Muhammad's death, they conquered from the Middle East all the way past up to Morocco. After they conquered and took over Morocco and did all that, And it's not conquering the way you think. They're basically spreading the words of Muhammad. People are becoming inflamed with a little bit of manipulation and subjugation after his real words, and then basically they war after for it. It's like if I got a whole bunch of people converted them to Islam and then took over the Byzantine. But at the same time, I don't fault them because Catholicism was bloody violent and crazy. They was killing people, nonstop death, a war machine. It came from the Torah and these rivers and these books, thanks to people like Josephus. Because Greece and Rome were already mixing into Canaanite culture. They had went over to Africa. They didn't necessarily like from my perspective. I think they defeated Egypt, but it wasn't like it was like they started learning about them and learning about their gods and stuff. Because you guys talk about the 12, the 12, the 12, the 12. That's from Mu'ad and the feather Mu'ad. You guys talk about the beginning mound and the light in the waters. That's from a tomb being created on the beginning mound. They're basically learning a bunch of African culture and Canaanite culture. And then basically, I would say Mesopotamian, but those people from Iran and stuff ran up and conquered them and learned from them too. And so, yeah, that's a good thing right there from Dan. Idols are ideals, and the Bible and Quran are full of ideals or idols. Exactly. And basically, what's being created out of these books are physical teachings and religions. And those physical teachings and religions cause people to become unaware to reality and what's actually going on. But then they follow a path of what their spiritual nature is being taught in the darkness, where nobody else can see on the inside, the thoughts, the imaginations, the feelings. Because as I've told y'all before, now take the names of God's religions and other things out of you. Go throughout your day today and you see different titles. Maybe it's politics, maybe it's religion, maybe it's something. And take left and right and blue and red and Jesus and God and Allah and Muhammad and Hashem. Take all the names out and now say certain phrases. I'm going to conquer everybody. Instead of putting God there, say I'm going to take over and judge everybody for what happened to us, and I'm going to destroy them in a lake of fire. Now take all Jesus and God and all that other stuff out and just say what you just said. You're an arsonist. You just said you would light somebody alive on fire and torment them forever and ever. I'm trying to bring awareness back so we can understand what's truly going on out here. That's why I like to talk about certain kings like David. What's the difference between Judas and David? And why I tell you guys are praising the same ideology, but with different people, you're condemning it. King David was condemned. Read his words. You guys will just listen to preachers say David was the greatest king. And if David was the greatest king and was the anointed one to the Father himself, which is the one on the inside, because that's how you communicate. If David was so anointed and strong, how did he condemn himself so badly? He didn't have the inner strength that people say he had. And there was a show, an image. They thought because he slew Goliath, because he was able to cut off 400 foreskins, 200 foreskins, that he was the greatest. But fell on a stumbling block and lost his way. Those psalms don't come from strength. When I first thought that I was all condemned and was writing poetry, that came from me thinking I was coping. Then once I found the true strength and how it was on the inside, that's when I realized, holy shit. A lot of these people in the Bible that they're praising up were condemned and they let their own spirits run loose. So then as they were going to the grave all throughout their life, pow, this is Satan, pow, that's Satan, I'm a king, pow, I know it all. But then as they were going, I'm so cold. I need to lay with the prostitute as I die. Where'd his fire go? But Elijah was so powerful and he started so much, who I would like to call Yehohanan or Zoroaster. I'm going to give you a prophecy of how interesting life is and how sometimes how we come is how we go. So take Zoroaster, for example, and they said he went, or let's say Elijah. They said he came and did all this fiery stuff. He slew all these prophets and was destroying all this stuff, though it was for the Lord. But then he got lifted up in the firestorm. Zoroaster in history created all these fire temples and destroyed paganism in history to where they now was worshiping like fire temples and had Egyptian temples and stuff. They look like birds like Mu'ad. But then if you look later in history, Muhammad did the same thing to him. Even through paganism and stuff, they removed Zoroastrianism. So look at Yehohanan. Yehohanan came like a firestorm and destroyed Rome and Greece through the spirit, told him off. But in doing so, his own people and many other people got destroyed. Yeah, it turned a lot of people into lambs, and they followed certain words and were really tamed, like the beasts in the field, like how it's written. It will happen on the fifth and sixth day. How the third and fourth generation will hate me because things are initially being created, and there's no light, and the light's being created. And then the fifth and sixth generation was what? Look, them people was running through the crusades killing for God. But then in the ancient days, we don't want God. We don't want Yahweh, whatever the name was. We want to be like the nations. It all flip flops. And so now at the end, in these last 1,000 years, I'm trying to bring logic and clarity. And when I say that's not some magic key to unlock anything, I would like for by 3000 AD for mankind to finally figure it out. Please and thank you. Maybe before that. But the way some of these people are locked in some of these teachings, it gets hard. And so I'm sitting here with my Kemet tools trying to saw into stones like my ancient forefathers did, so I can let them loose from the cave, the algorithm of the cave. These are all metaphors. So I hope you can understand what I'm saying. I'm simply teaching people that I am the Most High. You are the Most High. Whatever waters you hover above, like look at Gideon if you know what I'm talking about, or if you don't, look it up. Gideon raised a great army. When Gideon raised the army, they had to go drink from the river. When they drank from the river, if they was drinking like this, Gideon told them to go home. He didn't want nothing to do with them. He didn't shame them and say they were bad. He just simply said he didn't want to fight with them. Everybody who drank righteously, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said it like that. Everybody who drank while paying attention to what they were drinking and paying attention to their surroundings went to war and viciously won. Understand what that metaphor means. Don't get to four rivers and drown yourself. Don't get to the rivers leading out of the garden and harm yourself. Remember, who I am in the heart is the Most High, and I walk with the consciousness at all times. Perhaps there are tainted fruits in the garden, and as I grow, I should learn and be an example of what the Most High should be. Which I'm not telling you to go teach people how they need to act or be holier than thou. I'm simply saying, please be true in your heart and do what makes you happy. If you don't want to donate $1 million and do all this crazy shit that people do, don't do it. If you don't want to give money to homeless people, don't do it. If you don't want to feed the poor, don't do it. But in the same ideology, if you get so cold to where you're like, fuck everybody and you don't even love yourself anymore, then when negative times come, don't be like, the world is so cold. You were that same person in the world, is all I'm saying. And so these ideas about prophecies and stuff, I'm telling y'all, William Tyndale wrote a lot of stuff. And he wrote it in a way that wasn't like the way it was printed by the Germans. I read about William Tyndale, and he said he didn't believe in Jesus having the ultimate power. He didn't even like that name. What a coincidence. He basically said the spirit's on the inside, just like a lot of these other major prophets are saying in this book, and that we should be careful. Because look at Daniel. Daniel, when talking to the king, didn't want the king's meat, and he behaved a particular way. Because that's how the Most High was talking to Daniel on the inside. And so if I were to say that, people look at me and be like, you eat bacon cheeseburgers and read the whole type of Bible any way you want, interpret anything I want. Now look, I am more like who I am. But who I am projects John the Baptist, a wild man that does what he will but don't cause harm. According to y'all, if I eat a double bacon cheeseburger, that's like wild locust to y'all, right? Especially if you live under certain laws. There's a lot of religious people that's pork, ham, and meat. And it has cheese on it, so I'm cooking meat and milk. They'll say I was a wild man, likened to John. But y'all not finna put me on no cross or light me on fire. The fire that I possess is a little different. The creation cannot harm who I am. I am likened to who I am in the heart. As I live in the heart, so manifests amongst the flesh. But I also remember I will not cause harm, so I do not cause harm to the flesh to make my will be. I am patient and understanding, and remember that sometimes I am spirit and flesh. I have instincts and thought. And so what I do is, once I receive instincts, I'm going to give you guys something about me. And I'm going to tell you about a little bit of my heart. When it comes to certain topics like the LGBTQ, I have no problem, for the most part, with what people do in their free time. I'm not a bigot in the sense that I'm going to Not even like somebody because of what they do behind closed doors if it don't cause harm and it's full consent. And are not manipulating people. If a man, straight, gay, whatever, comes and touches me, you'll notice my initial reaction is I'll tense up. That tense is for two reasons. And it might seem animalistic and instinctual, but it is not, because I'll explain why. There's a spot in the book that says lay hands on nobody suddenly. And I respect that because people a lot of times forget we are nature that reacts to external stimuli. And so when that man touches me for whatever reason, if it's like not my father, somebody giving me a hug or something or a handshake, what happens is I tense up. The reason I just tensed up is because my initial reaction, this might sound really funny and silly, but bear with me, is like an anime. In my mind, this is what's happening in real time while I'm still communicating with you. And I'm not doing it, this is just a thought. It's like, now in my mind, I just had a whole battle with you and I'm striking you. Not even necessarily striking you, but doing that kung fu shit. But in real time, what I might do is something funny like this. Unhand me, heathen. But as a joke, I might start laughing and being like, ha ha ha, you thought you had me. Being funny. Now, the reason why that is because my initial reaction is to strike them. Now, I'm not a violent person and I have great self-control. But it's for instinctual reasons, for two reasons. One, safety reasons. I don't know the intentions of any other man in their heart outside of knowledge of what I am able to do. And so in my mind, if I'm grabbing somebody, it's not because I want to be your best friend. A lot of times when I show people affection, I have very deep conversations. And within my deep conversations, I go out in the left field in terms of being funny about certain things and turning it to an almost a metaphorical spiritual playland. I like to joke about a lot of things. And so when I say that, I won't even, like we could be in the middle of a conversation. You can ask me a question or something serious, and I'll be like, biscuits and gravy. And they'll be like, what? I'll be like, it's so delicious and warm and buttery. But did you know that's essentially flour on flour? Something like that. Just sit, and then they'll probably start laughing or just because that's the type of person I like to lift spirits. I don't like to cause harm and pain. And if I'm at the point where somebody has irritated me to the point of me causing harm and pain, a lot of times what I'll do is calm down and calm down in the mind first, that constant quick prayer, and then in reality do what I need to that's efficient for not causing harm. And that's the way I try to live my life. And so, yeah, I can be like Cain. Sometimes I can strike you with the law. But sometimes I could be like Abel, live with passion outside of the law. So when I say strike you, I'm not saying don't kill nobody. I'm not saying kill anybody. I'm not talking about killing people. I mean, if somebody comes up to me and says they're about to sacrifice somebody for the word or they want somebody dead or struck for the word, now I'm going to give you the bread. You violent, murdering pagan. But at the same time, if somebody comes up to me and we're being funny and playful and I give a metaphor or something, they go, oh, the Lord Jesus don't appreciate that. Now I'm able. Hey, you gonna strike me, Cain? I was being funny. I didn't say anything inappropriate. Well, in the name of Jesus, it's inappropriate. Hey, take your phone out and I want you to go to Google real quick. Would you say that Jesus' name is initially from Hebrew? Yeah. Well, there was no J, so look up what ye means in Hebrew. Y-E. Okay. It's the beginning name of God. I am gracious. Okay, that makes sense. Now look up what sus means in Latin and who crucified Jesus and carried his cross and name for 2,000 years. Now what? What you gonna say? Well, the names of the Son of Man don't matter. So if the names of the Son of Man don't matter, get the fuck out of my face from being funny about a metaphor and you taking it too seriously. See how it can all come back around? But I try not to talk to people like that for the most part. I just simply try to raise awareness and be kind to others to the best of my ability. Because sometimes the Lord is quick. Somebody say some off the wall, out of pocket shit, and the Lord will be like, before I can stop it. And a lot of times that only comes when people are being R-wordy, not. I'm talking about like saying negative things about women, like crazy shit. I don't play that shit even joking. Nope, fuck out my face. Or when people talk about owning other people or causing harm or stuff like that, that type of stuff. I can't stand that. It's not funny. Or like when people just, yeah, it is hard for Cain to forgive because if you honestly gonna murk somebody, that dude wasn't ready to forgive. But I don't know what Cain was going through because All I know Cain is a storybook character, and I am me. And from my perspective, I try not to slay my brethren when he upsets me. But on the other hand, you know what I mean? You know, sometimes you got to give them skippy paps. I'm just kidding. Don't fight. Don't fight your family and love them and whatnot. But it doesn't look like any humans have any questions because I'm not. For a number of factors, they want me to say some magical bullshit. So, okay, calm down. They want to believe in magic until the end. Let them. I don't. You act like I'm the one that's in pain or I'm the one that's hurt. I am fine. Let them do what they will. And so, with that being said, I bid you. Oh, I didn't solve the shit. I just got the bottoms. It would be really silly if I didn't turn this on to solve this, but I guess if I don't solve it, that would suck. Then be like, look at this a-hole. Freaking. But then if I mess up and can't solve it, what if I can't solve Rubik's Cubes? You guys have been watching this live for like a whole hour long, and by the end of your video, I just cut off and it's like, and I never solved it. Wouldn't that suck? You know what that reminds me of? There's a there's this thing on a lot of videos or advertisements to where they'll talk about something the entire video. They'll be like, this is the way to. Do you want to know how to clear the blah 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 from your heart and get back healthy again? Then then use our product and let me explain why. And they spend the whole video explaining the product and blah 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 blah, and they never freaking. And then by the time they get to actually explaining the product, they don't really say nothing but the same crap they've been saying this whole time. You know what I'm saying? So I just wonder if anybody else experienced that. But that would be what it's like for me to tell y'all I'm gonna solve a Rubik's Cube while talking for like 2 hours and never solve it. That would suck, right? So I'm just gonna go ahead and procrastinate for a second. But yeah, shout out to Dan Sabre, super awesome. One day he's gonna make a video, I think, and I'm gonna be the first one to see it. Well, okay, so I guess Dan has already made a video. Oops. Oh, and I hope I didn't just spin that too many times. And it's about creating pianos. It's called Piano Fritz, and y'all should check it out. But I'm gonna start playing piano again one day when I'm done loading people onto the ark. There you go. It's solved. Am I any smarter, or did anything that I say have any more validity because I can solve this, or am I a nut? You'll never really know. So it's always to love who I am here and let that project and grow. If calling Jesus and God helps you and keeps you coping in life, then let it be so. I'm not here to strike any of you in that sense. But if I see you using Jesus and God to manipulate people, I will perhaps strike you. But what does that mean? I'm just full of metaphors. Thank you, family. Good to be here. And I'm going to be like the world for a second. If you buy my product and sign up for my video, you'll be a spiritual Neo in 10 days. No, get 2 days of free video advice. No. Peace out, family. Have a good day.